Welcome to The Road Less Traveled with Tiffany Rosenbaum. This podcast is about sharing the success and failure of entrepreneurs. Join in and learn from others' mistakes so you don't have to go through the same hardships in business. Now let's welcome your host, business coach, real estate investor, and proud wife and mom, Tiffany Rosenbaum.
We're so excited to have you on today, Josh. I love your story, and I'd love to just start with that. Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about you and your backstory?
To simplify it, I've been blue-collar, hands-on since I was a toddler. I think the first time I swung a hammer, I was about 2 or 3 years old. And it was actually a form of a toy when I was a kid. The old man would just give me a handful of nails, a hammer, and a piece of a 2x4, and that meant that I didn't bother him for a while. And that's really kind of where it started. And I was having a conversation recently. I've never worked in the food service industry. I've always worked in the skilled trades.
Okay.
And from mowing lawns in the neighborhood as a 10-year-old kid to sweeping floors in a mechanic shop at 13 to getting into the HVAC industry in 2001. And I mean, I skipped over a bunch of boring pieces there, but the exposure to that world has been my entire life. And ultimately, it's what has led me to not only this conversation with you, by the way, thank you for allowing me to be on here and share this overstimulating story. But ultimately, it's put me on the mission that I'm on of working with blue collar industries and working with skilled tradespeople on how to develop their ultimately their leadership skills in business.
What job or what company were you with before you started your own coaching business?
So my first company, I was partners in an HVAC company, and that started back in 2013.
Oh, nice.
And that was a 5-year venture that I will tell you is an entire podcast episode in itself. And that led into starting a small construction home repair replacement business. And I just kept having something in my soul nagging at me to coach. In 2020, I launched my podcast. And at the same year, I launched the coaching program. And it's been a pretty amazing experience since.
When you were in your HVAC company, what was the biggest struggle?
Oh, me. I was the biggest problem in that whole company. You know, I joke with people. I tell them, you know, when I started the HVAC company, again, it was with a partner. I came from a tool belt. You know, I came from a service truck and jumped into business. And it's a terrible plan because I knew how to fix problems for clients. I knew nothing about business. I knew nothing about numbers. I knew nothing about leadership. I had just started to educate myself on this leadership journey that I'm currently on still. And it was amazing to me that, you know, I was the greatest limiting factor in my business, but I also discovered throughout that time frame that I was one of the greatest solutions to offer my business. And I became obsessed. And Tiffany, when I say obsessed is putting it lightly. I mean, I basically started this lifestyle of being devout to learning business, learning leadership, learning communication, learning sales. And I did that in the kind of the beginning and middle of my HVAC company, and the success that we saw from it, not just from a financial standpoint, but from a cultural standpoint, from a leadership standpoint. I fell in love with it. I really did. And ever since I discovered that quality leadership was the missing ingredient in my life, I started working on developing as a quality leader.
No, that's really important. You know, I'm really big on teams. How did you get a good team? What did you feel like you had to do to create that in your HVAC company?
Yeah, I love that question because my favorite part of that whole company was my team. And I actually wasn't the success in that company. I was just the one driving the bus. My team gets full credit for everything that we got to experience, good and bad. We had a very simple rule. We hired and fired on attitude. That was it. I didn't understand KPIs. I didn't understand disc profile. I didn't understand all of these tangible metrics that we can use as tools. I think they're great tools. I think they're great guide wires to building a successful team. But we were so focused on developing a culture, a place where people enjoyed the people that they worked with. And I was focused on developing myself into being a leader that I had never had in my life. And it was this kind of brilliant melting pot of mistakes and failures and money that ultimately allowed us to kind of grow into something that I had not experienced before.
So how did you continue to develop that team? Because it's not like a one and done type thing. How did you continue to develop that culture?
Yeah, the culture is a constant work in progress. Forever. You don't just, culture's not a plug and play.
We wish
right?
it was.
We do, because people have bad days, they have families, people get sick, the weather changes, the clients decide that they don't want to be compliant. And I learned that the more involvement I got with my team and the more buy-in I got with them, the easier it was for me to continue to develop that culture, because they policed the culture themselves. They were protective of the thing that we had built. So as the company grew and we brought more people from the outside to the inside as employees, everybody was really kind of upfront and giving about, this is what's important to us here. So by having that buy-in from my team, it expedited the growth and the continuation of our culture.
What did y'all do to create that culture? Did y'all do events together? Did y'all read books? What did y'all do to continue? Because, yeah, it's one thing to say it, but how did you put a plan into action to create it?
Weekly team meetings. I'm a huge advocate for meetings in general, and not death by meeting and death by PowerPoint, right? Like, I think that's a real thing. I think people get wrapped up in the fact of having a meeting and they could really just share it with an email and it would be solved. But I had come from workplaces where the company meetings were, they were profit focused. They were revenue focused. They were production focused. And I remember as an employee, none of that ever made me, and I'm using air quotes here for people listening, it never made me feel good, right? It was, to me, it was a constant evaluation of what we were doing wrong. So I had that experience when I started the Tuesday morning meetings. And if you talk to anybody in my team, that's what they were called. They were the Tuesday morning meeting. I never talked about production and numbers in our team meetings, because my team meetings were designed to be culture driven. So I leveraged everything that I possibly could. I showed TED Talk videos. I would share snippets from a podcast. I would create whatever. And for 60 minutes every week, it was the most valuable and most powerful hour that we spent as a company, because it was a non-negotiable. You were not allowed to schedule an appointment during our team meeting time. So the sales team were there, all the service techs were there, minus an emergency call. Everybody in the company had to be there every Tuesday morning. And I just kept introducing the concept of personal growth and development and mindset to my team. And because it was so ingrained in our culture, it sounds cultish, right? You start talking about like, I'm at the front and like people are drinking their Kool-Aid, right?
But it's important. A community, a culture is so important in a company. If you don't have it, you become a revolving door.
And, when you look at companies, there's two types of companies that often kind of show themselves. And one is a high profit company that has a high turnover, or a high culture company that has no idea why they have money in the bank or not. Because people get so emotionally invested in one or the other that they don't learn the skills necessary to marry the two.
That's so true, but it's important. You have to have both to be successful.
I completely agree with you.
You have to have both.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Amazon, Walmart. Yes, they demand a lot, but they have employees, and I knew someone that worked for Walmart and loved it. Loved the culture that they had provided, and it's something big that we work on a daily basis, because if you don't have culture, like I said, you become a revolving door. So when you started the HVAC company, did you know that you wanted an exit at a certain time?
I did not. It was actually the complete opposite of my plan. My initial plan was to build an empire. I wanted to take what I knew as a hands-on skilled tradesman, and I wanted to build a powerhouse of the three main service industries: HVAC, plumbing, and electrical. And that was my long-term play. That was my vision, if you will. And I wanted to own the market in our small rural piece of Illinois. And that was my play. I literally, I knew there was something in my brain, Tiffany. I knew that I wanted to do a podcast one day, because I discovered podcasts back in 2012. And it was such a great resource for me that I knew it someday I wanted to give back. But that was the extent. I had no desire to coach or speak or develop the things that we've developed. I just wanted to build a healthy, successful company. And then literally none of that worked out.
So what made the decision for you to exit that and go into coaching?
How can I put this delicately? A failed partnership over money.
There's a lot of partnerships that fell, and people need to understand that. It's to go into partnerships, it's you need to know who you're getting into bed with, to be honest. And a lot of partners, the percentage of partnerships that fell are huge. It happens. So when that happened, did you know that you wanted to go into coaching at that point, or?
I think something had started to develop in my brain that I wanted to help people experience something better than what I experienced. I wanted to educate people and inform them and give them tools and skills that I had not had at that time, that ultimately led to my demise. And whether that was how to have hard conversations with your business partner, or how to look at a P&L and understand what it means, and how to manage accounts receivable, and how to approach the market. I'm an operations guy. I always joke, I'm a leadership coach, but operations is my gift. And I think that's probably my technician problem solving brain. I see something wrong, I'm here's a solution, implement it, result, move to the next thing. But I started to have kind of these twinges of wanting to help with other people. And it really came from conversations with people that I knew that were asking me questions about business. And why did we fail? Why did we succeed? What are some of the things that we done? And it just kind of started snowballing. And then I relocated. I moved from Illinois to Nevada, and I jumped right back into the workforce. So now I was an employee again. And that really expedited my desire to be a coach.
No, that's awesome. And what you said earlier, I want to actually pinpoint that question is, there's millions of business being added every year. Million. But 65% of businesses fell in the first 5 years. And you said something, how many people actually look at their P&L? How many people know how to do receivables, payables? I was at a conference and I asked how many people look at their P&L weekly or even monthly. And the show of hands it was very shocking to me. How many businesses do you coach that don't look at their P&L when you get a hold of them?
A smaller number, if you ask me how many I coach that, that don't, or, that do. No one does. The reality is, again, especially my demographic are blue collar businesses. I went to Voc school. I've been to, I don't know how many seminars. I wasn't taught to pay attention to the finance. And I had a partner that I entrusted to make financial decisions on my better half. But if you would have put a P&L in front of me, I couldn't have told you if we were winning or losing. And I think, to me, money, finances is the language of business. So you have to have that financial literacy. And leadership and culture is the language of people. So anyone that's listening, if you don't know your numbers and you don't know how to communicate, don't go into business. If you can't live your life on a structured budget, your personal life, if you can't live your personal life, control your habits on a budget, you have no business being in business because you don't have the financial literacy or discipline to build a successful company. And then the other part that's also, I think, equally challenging to learn is how do you properly delegate? How do you relinquish control? How do you trust other people? How do you hire? How do you build a team? How do you fire appropriately? How do you have hard conversations? How do you hold people accountable? These are all small pieces of the overall picture that you have to learn to start, build, and maintain a successful company. I'm trying to scare people away from going into business.
But what you're saying is very true, because on social media we see, create a business, be a business owner. It's not reality, because when you go into business, like you're saying, you need to know all these things. And 91% of businesses don't even get over $1 million revenue. That's astounding to me. Because if you're not making over $1 million, you don't have a team really behind you. You have a job that you've created. And when you have a job you've created, then in reality, are you actually making more than you would working for somebody else? And the stress that you have? It's just been interesting to me to really look into this and dive into this and research this, because what we see on social media is, open a business. It's easier today to open a business than any other time. But it is harder to be profitable because people think it's easy. They get into it and go, I'll just start a business. But then, like what you're saying, what you said, Josh, is completely true. If you don't know how to look at numbers and you're scared of it, because 9 times out of 10, oh crap, if I pull up that P&L and I don't know how to read it, what am I going to find, right? Mm-hmm. And then hard conversations. Let's talk about that one, hard conversations. That one was really hard for me. That one was difficult because if I have that hard conversation, what happens if they walk out, right? How did you learn how to have those hard conversations?
What I learned, I think the most important piece of hard conversations is clear expectations. Because if there is not clarity in your team, your employee, if you're running a 2-man shop, it doesn't matter. If they don't really know, and not just know, but comprehend and understand what the expectations are, how can you hold them accountable?
You can't.
You absolutely. So now your conversation becomes a top-down, really kind of a deconstruction of them as an individual or the role that they play. And now the conversation becomes accusational, and they don't know that they're losing. They don't know how they can win because there's no clear expectation. So I learned early on, that was one part of it. The second part of it is I had to learn emotional discipline, not emotional suppression. Emotional discipline is not emotional suppression. And I think people confuse those things. So I always like to be clear, but I have to practice emotional discipline. If I'm going to turn up the volume, it had better be serious, because I truly believe that lacking emotional discipline is true weakness as a leader. If you're going to yell and you're going to throw things and you're going to express yourself in this kind of tyrannical way, first of all, you're spending leadership equity that you probably don't have anyway, and no one's going to follow you. And now you're trying to lead by fear. And what I've learned about people that lead by fear, it's really just by fear of being found out, because they're scared and they don't know. So the louder they are, it creates distraction from the truth. So I had to learn emotional discipline really early on in my leadership. And I had to, and probably the third piece to this was, I have to remember, I've got to, as the leader of the company, I have to meet people on their level. I have to meet them where they are. And that's really tough because it requires a lot of control of your ego, and it requires a lot of patience to understand. And if you blend those three together, you have to have a really great skill of communication.
No, you do. And I think one thing that's important, I think the team actually, they respect you more, and they actually appreciate the hard conversations more than what we think they do. Because then they know what to expect. Like when you can lay out your expectations and then, like you said, make sure they actually understand the expectations, it gives them empowerment. It gives them, oh, I know exactly what I need to do. The problem is when entrepreneurs go into business and they can't have those conversations, or they struggle to have those conversations and they don't have them, that person on the other end is in confusion. They're in chaos. They're like, oh, I'll just go out throughout my day. But then when an entrepreneur goes to that individual and says, hey, you're not winning or you're screwing up, they're like, well, I didn't even know what I was screwing up about, And then it's just this, it's not a win-win situation. People, human nature is they want to actually win. They want to win. But how many times do entrepreneurs not give the toolbox to have their team win?
Most of the time, because as entrepreneurs, we expect everyone to care as much as we care, work as hard as we work, and see our vision without us expressing it. We just assume that the moment that we hire someone, they're a multiplication of us, and that they're just going to do what needs to be done. And the second that they don't, which is probably the number 2 second that they start in the company, is now you're frustrated. And it's sad to see how many companies that restricts because the owner or the leader just says, I don't want to hire anybody. I don't want to build a team. You can't find good help these days, right? That'll nugget. And the reality is it's all a leadership problem.
Yep. No, if you look at, and I always go back to the greats because I think that's where we can really truly learn from. Look at Walmart. Look at Amazon. You can always find good people. It's like you said, it's management. But when Amazon came into the market, what did they first do? They went over to Walmart and poached their executives. Why? Because they knew that those executives have already been trained by the best. So if they brought them in, then they could level up their team. And then they knew they would have good management. Management's huge. Now that's harder to do when you don't have, capital coming in and things like that. But the problem with small businesses, let's say when I started, is we hire generalists. We don't give them a game plan. We don't give them success stories. We don't give them KPIs. And then it's like, hey, just do this. The problem is that we're not giving them a plan of action, and we're not training them, and we're not giving them the toolbox to win. And that's when small businesses fail. You've got to give them every little bitty thing. And that's why I love the Amazon story, is how they went in and poached the best out of the best. Even small businesses, instead of hiring 4 generalists, hire 1 specialist and continue to do the other jobs. So many times we're like, oh, let's hire this many people, and we're running circles instead of going, okay, hire the specialist to do this, and then I'll do the rest. And then when the money comes in, hire another specialist, then I'll do the rest here. And continue that game plan so it's a success instead of going, I don't know. So many times we go into business, we just put our hands up and go, we'll see. Hopefully it works.
I like the specialist versus the generalist, because when I have these conversations with business owners, I always ask them 2 questions. First question I ask them is, what is it that you love doing in your company? And I think that's something that we've been taught to neglect. Like, it doesn't matter what we like or don't like. We just do the work. That's the first question. The second question is, where do you add the most value in your company? Once you identify that, you need to start figuring out how to hire everything else that you're doing. Again, the specialist concept. Who's really good at this, and you don't need to be doing this? Okay, you need to develop a role, develop responsibilities, expectations, compensation package, and all this for that position in your company, and then you work to recruit to fill that position. And then you got to learn to delegate and leadership and systems and transfer of information and all of the other beautiful, intricate pieces of a business. But you're right. You need to target who you're going to bring onto your team and develop a team of specialists. The other thing, and to your point of what you were saying, is high performers want to know what the score is. They want to know what the expectation is, because they're going to beat it. They're not just going to show up and meet the expectation. They want to exceed it. It is ingrained in their nature. It's how they're wired. It doesn't matter. You put the bar here, they're going to hit here. But if they don't know what that is, they're just going to work with you until they feel so lost that they're going to go find something else to do.
No, it's true. The plan, the people do want to succeed, especially competitive people. I mean, they want to blow that out of the water. You give me this, I'm going here. I'm going tenfold. And if a business owner can understand that, then they can always put a commission structure on to help those people even want to win even more. And knowing the drivers behind people. What do you feel the biggest mistake new business owners make?
Oh my goodness. The biggest mistake. That's a great question. I think I would say the biggest mistake that they make is they run their business with their ego.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one.
I think that is, from my experience in coaching, I think the biggest thing I see is the ego. I think that's the biggest problem.
It is. Someone says something to me that I love. It's, can you stand back and breathe life into your business? It has nothing to do about us. It has to do with your business is a living organism pretty much. And what are you doing to make sure it lives? Because if you don't breathe life into it and develop it, then it dies. You're either growing or you're dying. That is the simple words to say it.
It's true. And because of that fact, you also have to be mindful of the relationship that you have with your business. I see a lot of business owners that hate their business. What a terrible relationship to have, right? And ultimately they just don't want to go to work for someone else, so they continue the suffering of having their own business. And I try to express to people, I said, look, the relationship with your business is it's either give and take or give and receive. And you get to dictate what that looks like. A lot of companies, it also ranks high on the list of what people do wrong is they take from their business. They do not receive from their business. And when they try to take, they ultimately end up stealing from their business because they use it as a piggy bank, or they don't use the funding properly, and they're not strategic about it. The give and receive relationship with your business is you're going to give, and you have to be willing to receive. Mm-hmm. Receive time, receive money, receive compensation. But you also have to receive the hard times, the struggle, the depression, the fight factor. And if you can understand that your business is a living, breathing thing, you have to be very aware of what your relationship with your business is like. And if you hate your business, I promise you it's not winning. Because if you had a close friend or you were in a relationship and you didn't like that person, they're never going to win for you.
No, they're not. And I love how you said that. There are a lot of people that hate their business, but it's because of the concept that people are like, oh, you got to go own your own business. That's where you get the freedom, right? That's false. That's what we see on social media, people. There's an entrepreneur and there's an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur takes on all the risk, and entrepreneurs literally grind and they take home the stress a lot of times. They deal with everything. An entrepreneur is someone that works in the business, makes the decisions, has the freedom as well. They just don't have the risk. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting is that's what people have to decide. Do you want the risk or not? And it's okay either one, but decide what you want, because you can get freedom working in someone else's business as well. Actually, a lot of times you get more freedom. And with social media and how it talks about it, I'm like, the reality needs to be discussed, because so many people start their own businesses, but like you said, don't know what a P&L is, don't know how to run a budget, don't understand marketing, don't understand hard conversations. And so they get into this, rat race that is depressing, to be honest. And a lot of people that go into business, they go through depression because of this, what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. It's okay to be an entrepreneur, and people need to understand that is a huge factor to business as well. Like, I have a lot of entrepreneurs, and oh my goodness, I am so incredibly grateful for them. They make decisions, they run it, they are amazing. And I talk about that because it's so important. Either one's okay, but you just have to decide which one fits well with you. And you saying that it sparks something to me, because people need to understand either one's okay. Which one do you want? Do you want the risk and the stress?
Yeah, I love the factor of an entrepreneur. I really do. And I think that it's very misused or undervalued in business. Because when you don't capitalize on an entrepreneur in your company, what do? They go start their own company, and now they're a competitor. So I think entrepreneurship does require good leadership, and it requires systems, and it requires healthy communication. But you can look at an entrepreneur position, and you can literally generate multiple revenue streams with your position from the same company. If I have an idea of something that's going to save your business money or make your business money, and I have an idea and I work to create it and implement the plan and help manage it, there's value there. So there's compensation available, whether it's a percentage or whether it's maybe a couple bucks an hour. Okay, I can do that. If I'm really good at what I do and there's an opportunity to train people in my company, okay, if I have someone that's a master at diagnosing air conditioners, why would I not pay that individual to train the rest of my team? So there's another revenue stream. I wish I would have understood the entrepreneur factor better. I don't think it would have changed my path, but I definitely would have seized more opportunity as a young man in the trades trying to come up and develop myself.
No, and it's true, but like you said, develop your entrepreneurs, because every business has to have entrepreneurs for the business to be successful. To get well over the $1 million revenue mark, it's imperative. You're not going to succeed without them. And what you said was very important. It goes top down. Leadership has to be able to recognize, first of all, but then also empower them to be a true entrepreneur and to understand that. And so many times young entrepreneurs fail because, hate to say it, we went to college so we don't have to learn anymore, right? I mean, we went to college or we did something, so.
Yeah.
And I used to have that mindset, Josh. I was like, oh, I went to college, not a big deal, right? No. Then I was like, oh, crap. I have like a whole nother PhD to learn because I didn't get enough in college. Now, don't get me wrong. I love college. I think it's very important. But learning doesn't stop there. Learning continues, and it has to continue forever if we want to be good at what we do.
I agree. And that was something that I found in myself as far as development early in my journey. Was I made a promise to myself to be a lifelong learner, and just more than some fortune cookie phrase that I write on a bathroom mirror. My plan to that was I'm going to learn something intentional at least 10 minutes a day. And I made that promise to myself, I think, in 2013, and I've never missed a day. I have never not learned something on purpose for at least 10 minutes, whether it's a podcast, a TED Talk video, reading 10 pages in a book. It doesn't matter. I've never broke that promise to myself. And it is astonishing. First of all, it's crazy how fast a decade goes by, but it's astonishing how much valuable information you can acquire by leveraging what somebody else has already done and just using that conduit of information to improve yourself. So I absolutely think that dedicating yourself to being a lifelong learner is such an important ingredient to success.
I totally agree. What would you say to someone that was going into business? What would you tell them right now? Like they're like, hey, I'm going to go start my own business up.
I would probably ask them a series of questions. What problem are you solving? Who are you solving that problem for? And what is that solution worth? And what is your plan to make that happen?
And once they gave those questions, if they weren't right, what would you say?
Well, that's the brilliance of it, right? Is what is the metric of right and wrong? Mm-hmm. I think what happens, the reason I would ask those questions is because, are you having an entrepreneurial seizure, right? Are you mad at your employer and you've decided that you can do it better and that you're going to go into the market? Ultimately, those questions are meant to start a conversation. And that conversation is, what's your business plan, what's your financial plan, and what's your market plan? What's your attack plan? What's your battle plan to do this, to take market share, to serve your client with excellence, to create the best experience and to do it in a profitable way? What is your plan? What is it that you don't know? You're talking to me about this work that you can do. I love that you can shingle a house. But what do you know about the bidding process? What do you know about paying people to get it done? What do you know about workman's comp, general liability insurance? What do you know about the business aspect of it? If you didn't know how to do the hands-on work, how would you start that business?
This is really good questions, because how many people go in business without a plan? There's a lot.
Everyone. Yeah. I'll tell you my plan. My business plan when I started the HVAC company was to not be outworked. That was my entire business plan. And I literally almost killed myself trying to fulfill that business plan. Right? Like, I mean, physically, mentally, emotionally, I had nothing left to give because that was my business plan. And you get to a point and you think, all right, there's got to be a better way, because I watch people who I think are less capable doing more. So what am I missing? Right? Back to the ego thing. I'm like, oh, I got this. Yeah, I can do this. No factor. Right? But I don't think anyone ever stops to really think through the process from A to Z. Like, what is your sales process? How are you communicating with your clients? What does that look like? If you had a perfect company tomorrow, what does that look like? Does the market know who you are and what you do? Too often people build a company around a certain skill that they have. That's not a company. You now own a job. You literally, instead of someone else owning your job before, you now own your job, which means you now have all of the risk, all of the responsibility, all of the burden, everything that goes along with you owning the job that you already had, where you had no risk. It was on somebody else's dime.
And 9 times out of 10, they're making less money.
They are. If they calculate their hourly, how much money they're making per hour,
they're making less.
Yeah,
and
they're making less money.
But it's all because what we see out there in social media is, oh, this is what you got to do. And then don't get me wrong, I love owning businesses, but there's been a lot of years that it was like, oh crap, what did I do? You know, but I started my business off of necessity. But Josh, where can people find you if they're looking for a coach and looking to get some success behind them?
Yeah, I appreciate that. The Tradesman Experience is the name of my company. The website's thetradesmanexperience.com. The podcast is The Tradesman Experience. The Instagram, which is about the only piece of social media that I use, is also The Tradesman Experience.
Social media, Instagram's a good one. That one's a really good platform.
I like it.
Now you do a 2-day event though, right?
Yeah. As of this conversation that you and I are having, I had a 2-day event about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And my first one was in Reno. And I tell people, I'm like, bring your scuba gear because we're going to drown you. And it is like, it is a full immersion. It's 2 days. You leave. If you have the bandwidth to actually walk out on your own 2 feet, I didn't push hard enough kind of thing. But it's 2 days. You're captive your mind for 2 days, and you're in a room with other people that are experiencing the same things you're experiencing from different parts of the country in different industries. And we start, the way I explain it is we start at 30,000 feet. We start with a vision, and we end the second day with you staring into a mirror of who you are as a leader. And then you leave that 2-day event with a playbook that you've built for your company.
That's amazing. And it's so important to be able to understand these things. So that's amazing that you're doing it. We really appreciate having you on, Josh. I love hearing your story and everything that you're doing and all the people that you're helping.
Well, I appreciate that. The honor is mine. It's a privilege to be on here. It's great to see you again. Thank you so much for this opportunity and getting to share me and my story with your listeners.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh.
Yep.
Thanks for tuning in today to The Road Less Traveled. If you're organizing an event, workshop, or simply planning something exciting and would like to have Tiffany Rosenbaum join you or want to have her on your podcast, visit TiffanyMRosenbaum.com and click on Book Tiffany to get started.